User KMed said, "Oh, I'm not really sure why anyone would take Xbox's word with a grain of salt in 2025. Interesting. He puts 9 specific instances where he claims that Xbox has walked back some of the things that they have maybe promised or maybe changed their stance on anything. And so this is the premise of his own paradigm. The problem that I see here is that a lot of the folk who came out from this weekend looking quite weird because somehow they were all propagating fake news stories that Xbox had ceased production and potentially canceled this deal with AMD have not yet apologized as to what in the world they were all, feasting on, that they did not vet the information or wait for the information properly. Yet, they're all following this interesting, weird paradigm. For instance, IGN even wrote an article where they titled it saying you'd be forgiven, right, for believing a rumor that Xbox has canceled its next gen hardware. This is the article right here. They said after the week Microsoft had, basically increasing the price of their subscription, that's all they did. You'd be forgiven for believing a rumor that Xbox had canceled its next gen hardware plans, but the company insists it's false. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know IGN is a joke. That's already established. We can already put that down on paper. Not here to make friends. Don't care about a lot of the stuff that these people are doing. But how can you write that people believing a false report, a false account, propagating that false account because it's Xbox can be forgiven because Xbox raised the price of a subscription service? Isn't it y'all's job to inform the gamers about what the reality should be rather than excuse the bad behavior that has been propagating across the internet? I can't imagine nor can I understand how society has fallen so far from truth and reality that we will go ahead and just hand wave lies. This post-truth society is what you're seeing in video games, where people will see truth and blatantly lie, gaslight you for actually calling them out as liars, or come out and start to say or create a standard that they cannot live with or live by. No offense to you, Mr. KMed, but this is a cop-out. Do you know why? Because I'm almost certain that on the click of a button, I can also show you one because I have it bookmarked here from PlayStation. Now, I know people will say there is a whataboutism going on. And yes, there is. Because the whataboutism points out that y'all have not given PlayStation the same level of skepticism, even if they've already failed in the area of sticking by their word in different cases. So why then does PlayStation, even when they increase prices, never get this kind of, in my opinion, scrutiny? And why don't the people who foment bad news about PlayStation ever get forgiven? Xbox tax in 4K. Now, I want to see something because I think this is where people need to start holding the feet of these folk to the fire. Karen717 replied and said, I hear you, and there's some truth to a corporation, as if you dig good enough, you can uncover untruths or lies like believing in generations, in quote, or games will never come to PC or the performance of PSSR. So yes, absolutely, you should be wary of what a corporation says. That's what it's going to write. Where the arguments fall apart is when people who make the same arguments you state will go and put all their chips on the table to some random guy in a forum with nothing to show his credibility and run with that guy's narrative. Xbox demise has been predicted incorrectly for over a decade now. But here we are every time they have some bad news, the next rumor comes out with no hardware. They're about as wrong as the guys who predict the world's ending. What makes it worse is the people who are giddy to believe them. K-Med, you just need to drop it. You said, I'm just staying skeptical at this point. Again, how skeptical are you with PlayStation, who signaled that everything was fine and dandy, that they were going to learn from their mistakes, and then they canned the entire studio, Firewalk, and another studio who did nothing, Neon Koi. How skeptic are you to their own failures and their own ails and their own ailments? How skeptic are you to their own anti-consumer propositions that you should be forgiven if you were to get it wrong? In fact, I would like to scrutinize this article written by Wesley Yin Poole, but we'll take part of it in a different video. I'm just asking the question, what is your skepticism level when it comes to PlayStation? Is it similar? I don't think it is. You said, I believe a healthy amount of skepticism is okay. Of course, that is healthy. The extreme voices will always be the loudest, of course. I think Xbox will be around as a brand for a long time, but again, I'm just not going to expect anything from them. I might want to stop expecting anything from any of these brands, though, because stuff is changing pretty drastically. You know, I commend you for saying that. The only problem I have is you already took time to pretty much go ahead and blast us with a huge wall of text on your skepticism for Xbox and still have not necessarily been willing to basically give Xbox this level of skepticism. For instance, 6 out of 9. Bethesda games exclusive to Game Pass platforms. Phil Spencer in 2021, following the $7.5 billion acquisition, future titles will be exclusive to platforms where Game Pass exists. Promised no ports to PS5 or Switch to strengthen the subscription model. Reality 2024 saw releases like Hi-Fi Rush and Pentiment on the other platforms. A wider multi-platform approach followed. Now let me go ahead and tell you why number 6 out of 9 is one where I think anybody who sees it and thinks that this is a bad thing ought to be ashamed, because this was a pro-consumer move compared to PlayStation, whom around the 2020 timeline had Money Had It, Ghostwire Tokyo, and Deathloop from Xbox users, whom even after the acquisition still maintained the exclusivity deal because Xbox honored it. So if you're saying that them not actually locking players out of games is supposedly something that you should use to hold them with a grain of salt, then I gotta say you are championing and somehow inadvertently sharing an anti-consumer standpoint. So as much as y'all want to criticize Xbox, you have to beware when you're throwing criticisms out that would somehow insinuate that you want for gamers to be harmed. You have to be very careful. You said this again in whatchamacallit, 8-9, passed on major exclusive opportunities. You said Phil Spencer 2024 admitted, I've made some of the worst game choice decisions, citing examples like Destiny and Sunset Overdrive 2. Reality, Destiny succeeded as a multi-platform title. Insomniac partnered with Sony for exclusives like Spider-Man. These decisions affected Xbox's overall lineup. This is a very silly claim. It's a very silly claim. Like, this is just padding. As everybody and anybody can make a decision that is in hindsight that they do not see panning out. Not everybody is a savant. So, in a sense, what does this even have to do with Xbox's hardware? Weird. Another one. Limited platform experiment. Because you ChatGPT this stuff. You have to train the AI to pump this thing out. Phil Spencer 2024 regarding ports like Grounded and Sea of Thieves. It's just 4 games. Don't take it as a sign as everything coming. We'll put 4 games on there and we'll learn. You did not finish the quote. You did not also cite where he said that he thought that games that were exclusive to a single platform would start to become the exception, not the norm. If you were taking that into context, number 9 would not make sense. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? It's still a moot point because it's a pro-consumer move that benefited Microsoft and benefited the players who got their hands on this. So, K-Med, here's what you're doing. In order for you to basically go ahead and claim that you're being skeptic, you're throwing the consumer under the bus. This is the moniker. This is the MO of every single PlayStation fanboy while they're criticizing Xbox, they throw the consumer under the bus every time. It's almost like it's pretty much a staple at this point in time. They cannot make a criticism of Xbox without throwing the customer under the bus. And I think I know why it is. I'm going to say it. You're used to the trash that PlayStation has been delivering all this while. And that's what it is. You expect that the so-called exclusivity continues because you think it's a good thing. It's a terrible thing. If Xbox has given the impression that this was a good thing, I'm so glad that the competition pretty much and the market knocked them away from that particular trash crap nonsense called the exclusivity paradigm. It's stupid. Your studios are not going to eat if you're holding and locking games. Studios that you've basically held and locked games of theirs from others have found themselves in a very dire situation. Look at the way Square Enix is celebrating their freedom, dropping their games everywhere, because that's what makes the health of a game studio at the core. So once again, you have to be really careful when you all are criticizing Xbox so as not to blast your big toe off by accident. It's so weird that this is what the grain of salt has now come to be, where let the consumer eat salt rather than actually gain a benefit from their own money. This right here has now become a problem. And like I've said, I have to come from the point that a lot of PlayStation fanboys, you are not arguing against Xbox in good faith, as we have now seen that you've thrown the customer under the bus when Xbox actually changed its mind to do something pro-consumer. If it affected, and I'm going to say this and close the video, if Xbox went multi-plat and it affected the Xbox fanboy negatively, good for that Xbox fanboy that it affected negatively. I'm glad that business and reality slapped some sense into them at the end of the day. I'm glad. Because even they themselves should have known better that a pro-consumer approach is the way to go. And many of them argued and fought against me at first, but now their body has calmed down and they're now seeing how the benefits actually work out for the market at large. So anyways, we need to actually realize that at the end of the day, the health of the company is none of our business. The benefit of the consumer and the customer is our business. Thanks for watching. Peace out.